Now, we have discussed this before because of the mess that is college football, the separation, so to speak, of the Power Four conferences, the dissolve of the Pac-12, and all the other changes, about someone running college athletics, someone who is not the NCAA, someone who is not Baker, who's the president, somebody that may be new, fresh blood. They say this, hiring a CEO, investigative body, along with that to oversee the actions of the post-House settlement. It's never been done before. The NCAA has always been the ruling body. Can it work? Is it possibly neutral, objective enough to take on that job?
And look, I saw this tweet and I responded to it. Yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I think I could be it. Craig could be it. Soki, can you be neutral?
I mean, there's others that have been marketing themselves for this for like years now at this
Tim
point.
Brando.
Yeah.
He would love to do it.
That means he wouldn't get to do games anymore. So I don't know. He may not. So, but no, I think there's people out there that would do it. I think the biggest thing that it needs to be is someone who understands the functionality of the sports world as it's changing, not as they want it to be in the past, which I think is the reason for this. So I don't think that you're going to get somebody that's going to believe that they should go backward. They need to get somebody who will go forward with them and address it. What I hope is that they don't do the thing where they're going to hire somebody that doesn't have everyone's best interest at heart. But if it's the Power Four commissioners, then he's pretty much going to answer to those four, which makes me concerned for everybody else, which ultimately, like, I know that there could be a day where they break off and it's the super conference or whatever, but I just see college football eventually working into the two tiers of the Power Four and everyone else. And I think that's, especially if the Power Four commissioners are going to be the one hiring the CEO, then that's where they're going to try to point it.
Well, I mean, the thing about splitting off and doing the whole super conference thing, which I don't think you rule out entirely in the distant future, is there's a lot of loopholes that jump through, a lot of things that you benefit from having all of those other schools like March Madness, right? It'd be difficult to just split off and go, hey, this is the SEC Big Ten National Championship Tournament. I'm sure some people would buy that. A lot of people would, because a lot of people root for those conferences. But there's just things like that where it's not just black and white on, we're breaking off and here's this new entity. So they kind of need the other two. And the Power Four conferences, I do think that's notable, or in together on this endeavor, because right now they're still together. But I still think that if you're the ACC or the Big 12, you're constantly looking over your shoulder. And how could you not be? After Texas, Oklahoma, I would never trust anybody again. I think you can work alongside people and you can trust them to a certain extent, but I would always be wary of that knife in my back by Greg Sankey. Or maybe even more so, by the other commissioner who's a lot quieter, who we don't talk about nearly as much. He might even be the more dangerous one, because his conference is actually the one that's kind of leading the way in a lot of the different categories right now and winning in football, back-to-back national championships. But, yeah, I mean, it's notable. If you're a Big 12 fan, that you feel like you're still part of this, and if you're the ACC, you still feel like you're part of this and part of that upper echelon, so to speak. I think the part about this commissioner gig, though, is this is not you fantasy booking college football and like you get to do cool stuff like, I'm going to make the tournament like this and I'm going to do this. It's like, no, you're going to make sure the house settlement goes through properly and that schools are functioning the correct ways. And so this isn't like having your most fun parts of what you would like to do at the job and you just do that. Like, you've got to do a lot of the minutia and a lot of the probably other business-like stuff behind the scenes. So I don't know who checks all of those boxes. I know there's plenty of people that could say, here's how we're crowning the national champion, because we've all done that in our heads. We've all come up with our own version of the playoff. There's lots of people who could say, this is the date that we're starting and this is how the calendar works. And we do need somebody to firmly establish that and get that on good footing and just kind of good across the board. And so those types of things, certainly you need some devil in the details and need to work on. But there's a lot of that other stuff, the stuff that I don't find as enjoyable to talk about, quite frankly, that is going to come with this job as well. So who can do the CEO gig, the get in the room with lawyers gig, who can do the listen to coaches gig and all those types of things? I don't know. Nick Saban's a guy that...
And give the time up, yeah.
And, yeah, I guess give the time up as well, whatever that may be. And, whatever you're doing right now, your time's maybe being a coach, or maybe it's being retired, or maybe it's being in the media. Nick Saban has been all those things in the last couple years, but...
Protect your online privacy with NordVPN. Browse securely, access content from anywhere, and keep your data safe with military-grade encryption. Whether at home or on the go, NordVPN ensures your digital freedom. Stay secure. Download NordVPN today at nordvpn.com. That's NORDVPN.com.
Anybody else for that matter, you're going to have to give a lot of your time up, and you're going to have to be a great listener. And so there are some qualifications that come with this job, and it's unique because we've never seen this job before. And so it's a very interesting little story that we've been sort of expecting, but where it goes from here, I don't quite know.
You mentioned Nick Saban in the story. After talking to sources, these 5 names would make sense to fill the CEO role. Oliver Luck. He has been in a lot of different places. Former player, AD, has been a part of a lot. It just doesn't seem like he sticks anywhere. Nick Saban, he was mentioned. His transition to ESPN has been a revelation. Gone from GOAT, college coach, to now college football influencer. And when Nick Saban talks, I listen. I do. Now, I saw some bias from him, though. Being a part of the SEC, there were times he slipped into that all 16 of our teams are better than anybody else's top 2 or 3. Not quite that, but I did see a little bit of that. He would have to eliminate that walking in the door.
I don't know if he can. I mean, he's like that to me is a pretty severe conflict of interest. If I'm the other 3 and I have a guy who believes that the sun rises and sets with one of us, then I don't want that. Because he does. And everybody's got flaws, but...
Well, doesn't everybody really, no matter what position you have, doesn't everybody have some sort of bias because of where you lived or worked or what you like?
Nobody's completely unbiased, and we all have our biases, but I think like when you're looking at this job, that's a pretty clear conflict of interest when you think about who, is running the thing and when it comes down to who has his ear the most, well, that's going to be Greg Sankey. And it might wind up being it anyway, but I think you need to start out with someone who Greg Sankey already doesn't have a substantial lead with. I mean, it's if it would be like giving Alabama
sometimes
14-point
when
lead.
Saban talked during the ESPN game day, he sounded like Greg Sankey.
Yeah. So it would be like, look, you're already playing Alabama, but then you're like, oh, by the way, they're already up 14-0 before we've kicked it off. That's my problem with giving this job to Nick Saban. My other problem with it is he's in his 70s. Like this, I would like this to be someone that has a 10 to 15 year look at this.
Don't you know we only elect like 80-year-olds for the highest positions of power nowadays?
Yeah, I guess so,
He's too young for the job probably and for leadership. No,
he's also stepping away from the game because I do think that some of the new parts of the game have kind of not spooked him, but he did not want to have to play that game.
Well, I don't know that he'd want to leave game day and do all of that. I think he's got a pretty comfy gig. I mean, why would you want to have to go get into the minutia and the mud of dealing with house and applying all these things unless it's just a passion of yours? So, I mean, we don't need to get hung up on Nick Saban. He's a name mentioned. He's not the only name. He won't be the only guy that they eye for this. But I do think that in that article by Dennis Dodd talking about this, that Mitt Winter, the attorney, who we've talked to on a couple of occasions, brought up a good point, and this is the thing they're going to have to answer first, is who's going to be unselfish about this? Mm-hmm. These are the most selfish, greedy people in the world. I mean, I take that back. They're not that level, but they are reminiscent of some of the most greedy people in the world. These are the people who you had to basically pry out of their cold, dead hands NIL money for athletes, and they waited till the absolute last second until the court said, no, you have to pay these people or else this whole thing gets burned down, to finally do something about it. And then they played woe is me. Oh, well, we can't afford, and it's been a whole song and dance for like 2 years, and so finally they're starting to get their way where now the schools can be directly involved. But these are the type of people that are in leadership that we're talking about. These are also the type of people, to Mitt Winter's point of, hey, let's all play by these rules. Report comes out, Florida's busted because and I'll just use Florida as an example, just first team that popped in my head. Oh, well, they're going around this rule and around that rule. And then the moment they get busted for it and you go to penalize them, what do? They turn around and they sue the NCAA, who they are a part of and whose rules they helped create and agree upon. And then now they sue, as soon as they get in trouble for these rules that they were a part of and agreed to, they call lawsuit. And we've seen this time and time again with schools who are all part of the NCAA, who apparently want these types of guardrails as well. But then once they're under the bullseye, they suddenly want to play, let's go to court, and we win, and we don't get penalized. So how are these people all going to come together and agree on rules when every time they try to enforce a rule, whoever's on the other end of it sues, and then that...
Yeah.
So how do you enforce anything?
And I do think that there are some schools, if they're faced with let's say there's 5 schools with the same penalties, recruiting, tampering, whatever it might be. I don't even know if you could have recruiting penalties anymore except tampering. And that's been going on and probably will continue to do so. I still will not trust a group or a person that when you have Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma in front of the NCAA, in front of their infractions committee, and Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and it's maybe Arizona, which is a big school, are they going to be as even-handed when it comes to any kind of discipline?
Well, I don't think we need to all dwell on, too, though, like the favoritism thing. Like, there's definitely bias. Like, we know that. We know that TV networks have bias. They pay more for certain leagues. Well, that's somewhat explainable. Those are the biggest programs. They have the biggest audiences, the most money, and so you understand that to an extent. That's why I said for, like, the Big 12, for example, whenever this TV stuff gets brought up, it's like it's not about adding more teams. It's about winning and becoming popular brands, and I know that's very hard to do. So maybe just add is the long answer to scrounging together a few more dollars. I think it's win-win-win, and that's how you raise. Like if Arizona State had won, that would have been so much bigger for the Big 12 than anything else they could have possibly done. And unfortunately, they fell just short. But we can't sit there and worry about, well, what if they love Alabama too much? Because then we're just going to be frozen in non-decision making. And so, yeah, there's going to be biases. There's going to be certain things here and there. But I think my question or my thing I just brought up is far bigger of a worry than, what if Nick Saban likes Tennessee too much? It's like, well, how are you all going to actually operate when you've never been able to operate? And and before you try to boogeyman the NCAA, you are the NCAA. You are the boogeyman.
You're the one that approves the rules the NCAA tries to enforce. Yeah. David Shaw is a name that was interesting. We're not going to go over everybody, but here's Condoleezza Rice, who's been on that college football playoff committee, Rick Neuheisel. His name was interesting because he faced some infractions when he was the head coach at Washington. And then one of the names that I think Mac Brown, who we had on just, 3-4 weeks ago after we retired, as somebody that might be somewhat interested, at least a name that could be discussed.
Again, Mac just runs into the thing of like, he's in his golden years. Like, let the guy enjoy something before we throw him, unless he wants to do that. But I also want him to be back on television because I thought he was really good when he was. I like the Rick Neuheisel thing is very interesting to me, as is David Shaw. David Shaw's, obviously when you're the coach at Stanford, you can't just be a throw ball, catch ball, tackle dude coach, which you run across them, not too often anymore, but brilliant guy. Same with Rick Neuheisel, really, really smart guy. I'm intrigued by those, but when you talk about coaches, do they have the media savvy? Maybe Rick Neuheisel, who's been in the media for a while, might know those things, but that's the other thing is how do you help guide these media deals moving forward?
I'm just curious, why do you like Rick Neuheisel so much?
It's intriguing to me because he's been out of the game for a little while. He's been in the media. But again, it's not like he was some kind of stellar coach.
He's definitely not to the level of any of the other guys that we mentioned in terms of career.
But I think he has himself propped himself up a couple.
I don't think he's nowhere near the level of the guy.
I guess maybe I'm intrigued by the idea of someone in the vein of a Rick Neuheisel who's coached, who's maybe not been the coach at Alabama or Texas or A&M, or I'm saying all SEC schools, or Ohio State. That's not a coach at one of the behemoths that was, he was at UCLA, is at Washington. Those are big enough schools. Colorado.
I saw somebody bring up Bob Stoops. I think he's too busy having fun coaching like rec league football, minor league football, and shilling tequila. I think he's really enjoying his post-coaching life, so I don't know that he would be up for the job, whatever that job is.
He shows up to interviews in Tommy Bahama
shirts. I don't think he's really trying to be sitting in an office all day going over the minutia of NIL deals and whatnot. I think he'd rather spend his time doing something else, and I would as well if I was him. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of names. It doesn't have to be an ex-coach either.
And, yeah, that's true. The other thing about Bob Stoops, if he wanted a hard job again, he could have easily just taken the Oklahoma job back.
Yeah, instead of just the
Lincoln
wrong
Riley
game.
left.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think would have done well.